If something in your outer environment is controlling your thoughts and feelings, then you're a victim to your environment.
Yeah.
And yet, how you think and feel creates your outer world. So if you're thinking and feeling equal to everything that's known in your present personal reality, you keep creating more of the same. So to change then is to think and feel greater than the conditions in your environment.
Clock time is fine, but psychological time is when the future takes over your mind and your entire thought patterns are geared only towards future, and you treat the present moment as either just a means to an end because it enables you to get to the next one. You're always reaching out, so to speak, internally to the next, yet never quite here, always looking for some fulfillment there. So you can never embrace the fullness of now.
A lack of knowledge is a lack of power. And I say we have been deprived of knowledge of who we really are, how powerful we are, because all the knowledge we get in growing up is how weak we are, how vulnerable. Oh my God, viruses are coming, parasites are coming, everything is falling apart. And I go, well, that's not true.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I watch these videos every day because I need them for motivation. Being around successful entrepreneurs every morning helps me believe that I can do great things too. It's like your morning coffee, but for your goals, kickstarting your day with a blast of positivity. So here is a challenge for you. Try watching one video every morning for the next 30 days, and let's find out together if they help you do great things too. If you're in, leave a hashtag BELIEVE in the comments below so I can celebrate with you. So today, let's get some incredible motivation from Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, and Eckhart Tolle. Enjoy.
A habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times that your body literally knows how to do it better than your mind. Turns out, by the time we're 35 years old, we're a set of memorized programs. And so the body is functioning and the mind is unconscious. So then when there's crisis or there's trauma or there's disease or diagnosis or loss, the event sometimes causes people to feel so differently than themselves that they can finally see themselves through the eyes of somebody else. Now, that moment in neuroscience is called metacognition. This is the moment where we start paying attention to how we think. We start thinking about what we're thinking about. We start noticing how we're acting, how we're speaking. We start becoming aware of the emotions that we live by. And the moment you start observing those states of mind and body, you're no longer the program. You're the consciousness observing that program. And we begin to objectify our subjective self. In other words, you can't read the label when you're inside the jar. You've got to get out of the jar to be able to see who you are. So most people wait for that moment where they feel so bad that they could finally begin to make an effort to change. And of course, times are changing. And my message is, why wait? Why not just start creating a future every day and begin to think differently? You begin to act differently and begin to feel differently. And if you do that enough times, that becomes the new habit.
Talking about past and future and excessive emphasis on past and future in your life, yes, of course you need to have, there's nothing wrong with having a certain intention of what you want to achieve, take steps towards it. It's part of living here in this dimension. You can't just say, I'm never going to plan anything anymore. Just take life as it comes. Well, some people try to do that, but they're not that happy either after a while. So then your life will get very diffused. And so to have an intention, to make a plan, perfectly fine. Either a short-term plan, like I'm going to meet you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. How would you ever meet anybody if we didn't have time? And future on a practical level, of course it's needed. The question is whether future takes over your mind. Being able to use it for practical purposes is of course great, but I call that clock time is fine, but psychological time is when the future takes over your mind and your entire thought patterns are geared only towards future, and you treat the present moment as either just a means to an end because it enables you to get to the next one. You're always reaching out, so to speak, internally to the next, yet never quite here, always looking for some fulfillment there. So you can never embrace the fullness of now, or you make the now into even an enemy. Some people are always unhappy. Perhaps we all know one or two people like that.
Great.
who are, wherever they are, their complaining is never quite right. Wherever they are or whoever they are with, after a little while, they're very uncomfortable again. They should be somewhere else. You know the bumper sticker that you see in some cars, in various versions of it, says, "I'd rather be golfing." And then another one says, "I'd rather be fishing. I'd rather be this, I'd rather be there." When I visited the spiritual teacher Ram Dass, who lives in Hawaii, he has a bumper sticker on. Ram Dass was the person who, in the 70s, wrote the book Be Here Now. Anyway, he has a bumper sticker on his car that says, "I'd rather be here now." And then you realize you can still pursue whatever an intention, where you want to get to, a plan. I call that, it's a bit like a journey. Your life is a journey. You're going, you want to go from here to there. Whether you're going to get there, we don't know. Maybe on the way you'll branch out to somewhere else. But at least you have a certain direction. It's good to have some direction in your life. But while you are traveling, if your destination takes up most of your attention and you're continuously focusing on there, you miss all the journey, really. You can't enjoy the journey anymore. And most of your life is the journey. The arriving is relatively rare. The wedding, and a few more graduation, but so those moments are not the far and few between. So the rest is the journey. And if you can't enjoy the journey, which means the step you're taking at this moment is really the most important thing. Yes, of course, you're going that way, but this step is still to be enjoyed, because that's ultimately your whole life consists of the step you're taking at this moment. There is never anything else.
Consciousness is creating your reality. If you put a picture of fear into your reality, then your biology behavior will manifest things to be afraid of. Because this is a short statement, but to me it's the most powerful one. Simple and short, and it goes like this. The function of the mind is to create coherence between your beliefs and your reality. If I have a negative belief, the function of my mind is to manifest behavior to experience those negative realities. If I have positive beliefs, then the function of my mind is to manifest a positive experience. But we get programmed with so many negative beliefs, and that takes away our power, because we're not focusing on the beautiful things, we're focusing on the fear. What are you afraid of?
Hi, I'm Bruce Lipton, author of the best-selling books, The Biology of Belief, Spontaneous Evolution, and The Honeymoon Effect. I'm here to thank Evan Carmichael for featuring me on his YouTube channel, and I want to let you know that Evan is giving away links where you can watch the first episodes of my special Gaia series entitled Inner Evolution for free. Evan is making this offer to thank you for watching this video. You will find the links in the description section below. Thank you.
How can people get more comfortable with stepping into the unknown, and why is it such a scary place?
The brain is a record of the past. The brain is a reflection of everything in your environment that's known to you. It's an artifact. It's a repository of everything you've learned and experienced in your life. It's a memory bank. And so people wake up in the morning and every person, every object, everything, every place, every experience that they've had in their life is mapped neurologically in their brain. So they wake up in the morning and the first thing they do is they think about those problems. And those problems are memories that are really tattooed in the recesses of their gray matter. And the moment they start remembering the problem, they start remembering the past, they're thinking in the past. Every one of those experiences or problems has an emotion associated to them. So the moment they think of the past and they start feeling unhappy or anxious, now their body's in the past. Thoughts are the language of the brain, feelings are the language of the body. Thought and feeling, an image and an emotion, a stimulus and response, and you're conditioning the body emotionally into the familiar past. And the body's so objective, as I said, doesn't know the difference between the real life experience and the one that you're imagining. The body's actually believing it's living in the environment where that problem is actually existing in the present moment. So that becomes the familiar past, and we call that the known. Then people get up and then they rush through a series of automatic routine behaviors. They're on automatic pilot because they do the same thing today as they did yesterday.
And a habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. So now the person is in habituation, a program, and their body's dragging them into the same predictable future based on what they did in their past. In other words, we could take their yesterday and set it on their tomorrow, and there's going to be a lot of predictability. So if you can predict something, then that's the known too. So the familiar past is the known, the predictable future is the known. There's only one place left where the unknown exists, and that's the sweet spot of the generous present moment. And so we teach people how to master the moment, how to master their attention. And where you place your attention is where you place your energy. And paying attention is being present. And you know when someone's paying attention to you because they're present with you. And you know when they're present with you because they're paying attention to you. Well, it's the exact same thing. So you're sitting with your eyes closed and you start thinking, how long is this going to go? I got a lot of things to do. Oh, God, I got to think about that place I got to go to and meet that person. I got another meeting over there. And now your brain is actually defaulting and going to that predictable future. We discovered that you're not a bad meditator actually at all. This is actually how you do meditate. You become conscious that you've gone unconscious in your predictable future and you return your attention back to the present moment. That's a victory. Okay, so then your body says, hey, it's been about an hour. You usually get pretty judgmental around this time. You get in traffic, you get really angry, and you're sitting in a meditation, and all of a sudden you start feeling aroused and impatient and frustrated. And most people think, oh, well, that means I can't meditate. Well, actually, your body's used to being stimulated from something outside of itself. You settle the body back down into the present moment, and you tell it it's no longer the mind, you're the mind. Do this enough times and train the body to be in the present moment, to be in the unknown. There'll come a moment where the body is no longer the mind. The servant's no longer the master, you're the mind. And when that occurs, there's this tremendous liberation of energy that takes place in the body. The body's going from particle to wave. It's going from matter to energy. The body's being freed from the chains of the past or the predictable future. And we discover energy actually kind of moves right into a person's heart. And they start feeling really grateful to be in the present moment instead of being in the unknown and trying to predict the next moment. So it's a practice. And if you practice it on a regular basis, we discovered you can get really good at being in the unknown and going against thousands of years of programming that says the unknown is a dangerous and a scary place. There's better chances of survival if you run from the unknown than you embrace it. So you put the person that keep relaxing into the unknown, and sooner or later they realize nothing bad is happening in the unknown, and they just start relaxing and expanding. And there's just a host of biological changes that begin to take place. So I think you can make that a skill or a habit.
To go about wanting to manifest material abundance in your life is perhaps not the right way to go about it, because you're concentrating on the outermost layer of abundance. And even if you manage to manifest abundance on the outer level, it's not going to give you the true feeling of abundance. It's not, in other words, it's not going to make you happy. It's not going to fulfill you, except for a few days. The new possession, nice and shiny, whatever it is, and there you look at it, got it now, it's mine. And after a few days or a week or two, or give it a month, it wears off. It's no longer that fulfilling to be driving the Ferrari or whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with the Ferrari, but if you're looking to the Ferrari for happiness and fulfillment and to give you the feeling of, it's not going to work for that long. If you're just driving it because you enjoy that experience, that's a different matter. Manifest abundance from the inside out, not from the outside, as hoping that you go find some inner state through external things. That is the dilemma of many people who practice manifesting, which of course, manifesting is something that you can use, and it works if it's done rightly. But the dilemma or the fallacy is the belief that whatever you manifest is going to make you happy. It's to seek the fullness of life through what you manifest, through things.
There's an old phrase, Amrit, that is just a stock phrase of the world because it's truism. It says, knowledge is power. And everyone goes, oh yeah, knowledge is power, blah, 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 blah. And I go, no. Let me say it in a way that might be relevant to us now. I say, a lack of knowledge is a lack of power. And I say, we have been deprived of knowledge of who we really are, how powerful we are, because all the knowledge we get in growing up is how weak we are, how vulnerable. Oh my God, viruses are coming, parasites are coming, blah, 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 blah. Everything's falling apart. And I go, well, that's not true. It is true if you don't recognize your power. And I say, well, what power? And I go, well, one of the first things that disempowered us was the belief that genes control our life. Oh, why does that disempower us? I go, well, simple point. It says that as far as you know, you didn't pick the genes you came with. If you don't like your characteristics, you can't change the genes you came with. And then I add this little last one, the creepy one that says, well, the genes turn on and off by themselves without you. And I go, then why is this relevant? Well, if the genes are controlling my life and they're turning on and off without me, I am, definition, a victim of my heredity. Oh, there's heart disease running in my family. Oh, I'm going to get it. Cancer. Oh, I'm going to get the cancer. It's running in my genes. I go, that's a bunch of BS. Oh, that means belief system. That's a bunch of why is that relevant? And I say, because the idea that genes turn on and off by themselves is the biggest false story that you bought into, which took away your power because it says genes control you, you don't control your genes. And that's why you look at your fate is, what genes did my mom and dad give me? Because my future is going to be determined. And I go, completely false. Genes cannot turn on and off. And I go, we've been programmed. Gene turned on. Cancer gene turned on. Gave me cancer. I go, no. A gene is a blueprint to make a protein. And I go, okay, let's unpack that. I go, the body that you see in the mirror, look on the screen, see yourself, all that. And I go, that is made out of protein building blocks. There are about 100,000 different protein types that come together, assemble them together, and I make a muscle cell out of some proteins, make a brain cell out of some other different proteins. So if I, try to tell the audience, I say, well, proteins are like Lego parts. You got 100,000 different pieces, different shaped pieces. And I say, how you assemble the Lego can create a muscle cell, or how you assemble them can create a brain cell, a skin cell. And I go, so the point about it is this. Proteins are the building blocks, but proteins break down. So you have to replace them. But I go, oh, they're very complex molecules. And I go, where do we get the proteins when they break down? I go, we have DNA. I say, what's that? It's a blueprint on how to make a protein. I go, so what? I go, it's a blueprint. I go, so? I go, this is the story I always say. So you go into an architect's office and she's working on a blueprint. And I say, lean over her shoulder and go, hey, tell me, is your blueprint on or off? And she would look at me and go, what are you, crazy? It's a blueprint. There's no on and off. It's a blueprint. I go, aha, you're finally going to get it. A gene is a blueprint. It does not turn itself on and off. It doesn't know what it does. It doesn't know why it's needed. It has no knowledge other than how to make a protein. And I go, but you gave power to the genes. That's what we did. Oh, the genes control me. And I go, no. It's like the architect's story. There's a blueprint. Blueprint doesn't work by itself, but it works with an architect who can read the blueprint and even modify the blueprint. And I go, oh, well, if the genes are the blueprint, then who's the architect? I go, our consciousness is ultimately translated into chemistry that goes into the blood. And that chemistry is what controls our genes.
We may not be able to control everything in our outer world, but we certainly can control our inner world. And so it's not so important to not react. I mean, everybody reacts, I react. The question is, how long are you going to react? So if you keep an emotional reaction going on for an extended period of time, You're memorizing that emotion, and your body, as the unconscious mind, is believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The body doesn't know the difference between the real experience that produces the emotion and the emotion that we create by thought alone. So then the emotion then reaffirms the state, and then people start to use the problems and the conditions in their life to keep that emotion going, and I would call that an addiction. So we become addicted to the very life we don't even like. So it's important then for people to realize then, when you have that moment where you have crisis or something breaks down, that you do have control over it, and it's a formula. And it's a skill, and our research shows that you can teach people how to do that. And so then, when you're living by some emotion, there'll always be a gap between the way things appear and the way things really are. Emotions alter our perception. And if you act during that time, you'll always say the same thing. I should have never said that. I should have never done that. I should have never thought that. I should have never sent that email. So then, shortening your emotional reactions is a level of intelligence then that causes you then to recalibrate. Because most people don't think they have control over that. They'll say, that person did it to me. That circumstance is the reason I am this way. Then I would say, if something in your outer environment is controlling your thoughts and feelings, then you're a victim to your environment.
Yeah.
And yet, how you think and feel creates your outer world. So if you're thinking and feeling equal to everything that's known in your present personal reality, you keep creating more of the same. So to change then is to think and feel greater than the conditions in your environment. And to be able to do that to such a degree then, you're no longer reacting to the same people in the same way. And that takes an effort. It's not easy in the beginning. But once you start practicing, you get better at it.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight our favorite lessons from the video that will inspire you to remember what you learned today and actually apply them. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
The usual mistake or dysfunctional way of living, unconscious way, is, as I've mentioned before, is devaluing the present moment and overvaluing the next moment. Ego lives always with reference to past and future. We mentally are always somewhere else, instead of giving fullest attention to this, because this is the most valuable moment. Why? Because it's the only one, the present moment. Give your fullest attention to this moment, because it's not true that the next moment is more significant, because it never comes. So there is a way of being totally present in the planning for the future. It's all little things. And even whoever, if you're the Pope or the president of a huge corporation or the president of a country, it's still the same. The present moment in its richness that is usually overlooked because you're looking for something more significant. It's fine to achieve things, especially if they are beneficial, but for humanity and the totality on the planet, it's lovely to have that. But even that doesn't make up your identity. The more you honor the small things, the more likely it is that you'll experience more good things in the so-called future, because you have such a good relationship with the present. Gratitude is an underlying state of consciousness, which is giving your fullest attention and honoring what is. The power to manifest is in experiencing the fullness of the present moment, the undifferentiated fullness. So when you don't complain about not other people, but also about your life, then you can't be a victim anymore. I is the light of consciousness in which these feelings are being experienced right now. The victim is a huge prison. It is not who you are. And remember, thanks for everything. I have no complaint whatsoever. So there's this wonderful stillness here. And let's acknowledge it. The power is not just in you, it's all around you.
Of all the people out here, you and me and everybody else, 60% of the original downloaded programs are disempowering, self-sabotaging, and limiting beliefs. This is psychologists understanding these programs. And I go, so what's the point? I go, 60% of the programs are taking away the character and quality I want. I say, well, you got to change those programs. Then that's where I say, number one, how can I change it? And I say, well, self-hypnosis. That's how you got your program in the first place, hypnosis, just by watching your parent downloading, okay? So I say, that's number one. I say, yeah, but that only works for the first 7 years. But you still learn programs after 7. I go, how'd you do that? I say, practice, habituation. I say, you learned how to drive a car. You had to practice driving the car. And the more you practice something, the more it becomes downloaded, to the extent when you practice it enough, you don't have to think about it anymore. Why? You just have to push play and the program will play. I can drive a car without thinking about it. Well, in fact, most of the time I do. Why? Because I'm driving, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to go here and do this, or I'm talking to somebody in the car. I'm not paying attention. And yet the car is going where it's supposed to go, at the speed limit, no accidents and all that. I go, well, then who's controlling? I go, the subconscious is 1,000,000 times more powerful than the conscious mind anyway. It knows how to drive the car better than you have to drive the car. You want to change something, you make a habit. I go, what do you mean make a habit? Repetition. You got to practice something, repeat it to a point that the subconscious now has habituated that behavior. It knows the habit. Because once it's got the habit, you don't have to teach it anymore. It's already downloaded. It knows how to do it. So you want to drive a car? You got to practice driving the car. You want to play an instrument? You got to practice playing the instrument. You want to do a sport? You got to practice doing the sport. I go, practice is a process of habituation. Make a habit, practice it.
When you get really stressed and you get really out of balance, the arousal of the stress hormones causes you to put more attention on your body. That's what survival does. If you're being chased by T-Rex, you better be thinking about your body. The arousal of the stress hormones in survival causes our senses to get heightened, and we start putting more of our attention on our environment, all those objects, all those people, all those places. The arousal of stress hormones causes us to be obsessive about time. If you're being chased by T-Rex and you're at one point and you want to get to another point, you're thinking about how much time you have to get there. So the body, the environment, and time. So then that quantum field, that is that invisible field of energy that exists beyond this space and beyond this time that you can't perceive with your senses, is real. And in fact, it is governing everything physical and material. And the most stable form of energy, the slowest frequency that we perceive with our senses, is matter. Okay, well, there are other frequencies that go all the way right up to that 0 point field, that singularity, that source, that oneness, that wholeness, where there's no separation. That's where everything physical and material comes from. So is it possible that the human being with our consciousness can connect to that field and energy? And we discovered that when people move out of stress and survival and they begin to take all of their attention off their body, of all the people in their life, all the objects and things, all the places they need to go and where they're sitting, and not thinking about what's going to happen in the next moment or what happened in the past moment, they can settle into the present moment. And we teach them this, that if they can become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time, and take their attention off of everything physical, everything material, everything known in their life, and go from a narrow focus on focusing on everything physical and material to broadening your focus and putting your attention on energy and frequency, The act of doing that begins to change the brain in a very, very holistic way. The brain starts to become less modulated, less compartmentalized, and starts functioning in a more synchronized and holistic state. And the act of doing that actually changes the person's brain waves to get beyond their thinking analytical mind. Now, that is the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. So by changing your brain waves, you start dropping down in frequency and the brain starts getting more creative and the voice in your head stops talking to you.
I need my story. All the things that I've been telling myself in my mind about myself and other people and my parents and my relatives and my co-workers and my ex-wife and my ex-husband, and what people did to me and what I did and shouldn't have done, failed to do. Who am I without that? I can't let go of that. I need to think about this more. So it becomes a habitual place, the habitual place of the mental noise where you feel, that's me. And so every therapist knows that you always reach a point with your clients, patients, whatever, depending on the school of therapy, depends whatever you call your clients, your patients, whatever. There comes a point when you hit that resistance. They don't want to be free of their problems. And that the big challenge is is this person going to overcome that barrier? Because that barrier is not just becoming free of my problems, but also becoming free of a very limited and ultimately fictitious sense of identity, the me. So that is what I've described is the next step, one could say, in the evolution of human consciousness, is stepping out of self-talk, which is the conditioned mind, and realizing there is much more to who I am than this conditioned content of my mind. And that is the beginning of awakening. It's not those words, not that you need to believe that there is much more to who I am than the self-talk in my head, because that is still self-talk in the head. I believe there's more to who I am. And you better believe it too.
You think I'm creating life with wishes and desires. I want to be healthy. I want a great romance. I want to have a great job. And I go, those are wishes and desires, conscious mind. I go, 5%. 95% is coming from that program you got from other people.
How do we change? How do we change?
A little subject like that. Oh, a little thing. I could give you an idea. I said, you can only change the program you learn the way you learned the program. I said, what does that mean? I said, well, how'd you learn the first 7 years? I said, your brain wasn't even functioning up of consciousness. It was below conscious. So it's called theta. That's called hypnosis. I said, yeah, you can rewrite the program with hypnosis. And then you say, do I have to see a hypnotherapist? I go, no, cool. Why? At the lowest vibration in your brain is called delta, sleep, unconscious fully, okay? The next higher vibration is theta, imagination, okay, and hypnosis. The next higher vibration picked up at age 7 is called alpha, which is calm consciousness, thinking, okay? And then by age 12, it even gets a higher vibration called beta, which is like going to school or work thinking, very complex. So I say, so as an adult, you're at work and you're at the high vibration, beta, and then you come home and relax. Then it calms down. That's called alpha, calm consciousness. But the moment you fall asleep, you're in your bed, you're awake for a moment, then boom, you're not there. You went from alpha, you shut it off, no more thinking, you're not conscious, but the next vibration down is called theta. So while you went to sleep with your conscious mind, there's a period just after you fall asleep, a short period where the brain subconscious is listening because it's in theta, which is hypnosis. So if you put earbuds in or earphones on and you play a program through those ways of hearing that are programs that help you live a better life, healthy life, loving life, better job. They're called self-help programs. You can buy them at bookstores. I say you put that program on as you're going to bed, and you might hear some of it as, well, you're still awake. But the moment you fall asleep, guess what? You don't hear the words anymore. But your subconscious does because it's in hypnosis and theta. So whatever is coming in through the speakers is going in through hypnosis. You would just repeat the program, and guess what? You downloaded a new program. And
Oh, wow.
What'd you do? You went to sleep. Hey, I said, that's a lot of work. Why? You fall asleep, the program will take care of itself. You put the earphones on. Okay. That's called self-hypnosis.
I think fear has been very adaptive for us as human beings. I mean, I think, if you have a lot of common sense and you're navigating in your life, there's certain things that you avoid that I think is healthy. And I think there's things where you can't predict something or you can't control something, and you kind of get ready. That's what the early stages of fear is. That you kind of rev up and you get ready. You're ready to perform.
Anticipation.
You're ready to act. You're ready for something, right? And I think that's healthy when it's within a limit. And then when it gets to that point where you absolutely have the perception that it's going to get worse instead of get better, that's when the brain goes into these high states of arousal. And the arousal is really pay a lot of attention to your body, pay a lot of attention to everything in your environment. Do not take your attention.
It's a degree of vigilance.
It is vigilance. And try to predict the worst thing right now that could possibly happen. Predict the worst, because if you can get ready for the worst and you're ready for it, anything less that happens, you're going to survive. So the brain actually predicts the worst case scenario. When it picks that worst case scenario, the body goes into a heightened state of fear. Most people don't think that they have control over that. I mean, it's so primitive. It's so in our biology. It's hard to think that you have control over a fear response. Now, there's nothing wrong with having the fear response. There's nothing wrong with getting aroused. The question is, how long? Like, how long is this going to go on for? So you have a reaction 5 days ago from something that's happened, and you're still aroused by that event. You got to agree that you're addicted to that emotion. Keep it going, and it'll become more automatic. You'll constantly be thinking certain ways and doing certain things to reaffirm that addiction to fear. So for the short term, have the fear response. If you can't shorten the refractory period of that emotional response, more than likely you're going to be in a program for the remainder of your day. So what we teach people is how to master the fear. So take anxiety as an example, right? Many people come to the work and they have a high amount of anxiety. CEOs, engineers, doctors, nurses, dentists, people can't cross a bridge.
There's a business book called Only the Paranoid Survive, I think.
Yeah, there you go. And they've tried everything to try to change their anxiety. But what they haven't done is they haven't caught themselves feeling the feeling of fear and practicing with their eyes closed first. Not in their life when they're feeling fear, but let's practice when you're sitting in the meditation and your body starts getting a little anxious, starts getting a little worried, starts getting a little aroused. What are you going to do in that moment? Can you become aware that the body's feeling that emotion? And could you, like taming an animal, settling the body back down from that aroused state back into the present moment? Okay, it goes, great, I'm going to do this for 2 seconds. And like a spoiled child, it starts getting aroused again. Now, most people think I'm never going to be able to overcome this, but the act of sitting with that and keep lowering the volume and not letting the body be the mind, but you actually executing being the mind. Do that enough times and you'll condition the body to a new mind. And what happens is the brain stops firing those same circuits. Okay, then the person says, but what if this happens? And what if that happens? And then what if this happens? And they catch themselves going to the worst case scenario or going to the memory of the past, and they keep bringing their attention back to the present moment. What we discovered is if you keep doing that, you get better at it. And when the body, as I said, finally surrenders into the present moment, it cannot be in fear any longer.
Adversity can strengthen the ego, or it can gradually, or in some cases suddenly, dissolve the ego, or at least diminish it. So it can go either way. And I must agree with you. I don't know whether you literally said it. Perhaps still in the majority of cases, it strengthens the ego because people don't know the opportunity that every adversity represents. So why does it happen? How does it strengthen the ego? You can see it sometimes with people who are sick or people who are disabled. Let's say I've met disabled people with physical disabilities, for example. And in some cases, they are really angry with the world and bitter because look at what happened to me. They say, I can't move anymore? I've been afflicted with this. What have I done to deserve this? And these are questions that are the justifiable questions. The question, what have I done to deserve? Why has the world, or whatever they say, God, the world, the universe, or whoever, they've done this to me? Why? And then they become bitter and angry, and the ego becomes more and more rigid and hardened and so that is one way it could go. And then I have met people with disabilities who, through their disability, at some point, whether through a spiritual teaching, and in some cases never come into contact with any spiritual teaching, it just happened that at some moment they realized intuitively that all the suffering was generated through resistance, and then the resistance to the isness of their life, this moment, they were able to let go because perhaps the suffering was getting too much. Something happened, something clicked inside, or even if it didn't happen completely, they were able to have moments of inner peace. An inner peace that is not caused by an external condition, an inner peace that seems to be in contradiction to an external condition, so that they would say, how could a person who is suffering this feel so peaceful? And so also that applies to people who are approaching the end of their lifespan because they have some illness and they have been to the doctor, and the doctor says you have 6 months or 1 year, and suddenly something in them opens up, and all that remains is that the person already dies. There's no more future. And all that remains is the present moment and the aware space. So I've had the privilege of working with, when I was still seeing individuals, with 2 or 3 people to whom that happened. And they became luminous beings in the last few weeks or months of their lives, and became just, I couldn't see that there was any person left. There was only a space of conscious presence left. Just wonderful, as if they had just come into this world. So they came, and then they came to me, and then still asking questions, very profound questions, wanting to understand what happened, and it's beautiful. So this can happen. It can happen collectively to people who have
who go through warfare and in countries or become refugees. They lose everything. And again, it can go either way. Whenever there's any great loss in your life, that again, an opportunity opens up. If you resist, and you resist the resistance origin. The origin of the resistance is a narrative that forms in your mind that says something about the situation and about your life and about other people. So the narrative forms in your mind, and the narrative is an unhappy one. And then there's continuous resistance, a non-alignment with the isness of the present moment. Now, one could ask, well, how could somebody who's lost their home, perhaps even lost loved ones, and then they don't know where to go, how could this person be in a state of alignment with the present moment? Isn't that, how can somebody accept the unacceptable, accept that which in conventional terms would be regarded as unacceptable? How is that possible? But that's precisely it. If you can accept the unacceptable, that is the opening, and then you realize the unacceptable is actually not unacceptable, it is acceptable. And I was homeless for a certain period in my life with not knowing what to live on the next day or the next week. And I had already gone into the state of acceptance, so it was a very pleasant experience, but potentially would have been extremely unpleasant. So not having a home was for me already something that was not experienced as something bad. But I knew I had to take some action eventually to get a home. And so gradually something happened. I don't want to talk too much about that. I also mentioned in the New Earth, I believe, when I was at university, there was the Stephen Hawkins, the physicist who was confined to a wheelchair, who passed away a couple of years ago, whenever it was. He wasn't famous at that time, only famous locally in the university. We would always be in the same dining room having lunch, but not the same table. I never met him, wasn't introduced, but observed him many times sitting at a neighboring table. The one moment when I held open the door for him, he was coming through in his wheelchair, and I looked into his eyes and I could see there was no unhappiness.
The most prestigious journal on the planet, most prestigious scientific journal is called Nature. And there was an article in there by a quantum physicist from Johns Hopkins, Richard Conhenry. And the article was called The Mental Universe. But I tell people, I show them the actual last sentence in the article, and it says, the universe is immaterial. Well, that means it's not made out of matter. Yeah, because now we know it's all made out of energy. The universe is immaterial. It's mental and spiritual. Live and enjoy. And I go, holy Jesus.
A big revolution in thought.
Has published that, yes, it's all mental and spiritual. I go, yes. And my work showed how the mental pictures in your mind are translated by the brain into complementary chemistry. So there's chemistry for love, there's chemistry for fear, there's chemistry for anger. And so whatever picture you hold in your mind, the brain releases complementary chemistry that matches that picture, and it releases it into the body. And the chemistry of the blood is what controls the genes and the behavior. And all of a sudden it says, oh my God, it's just what the physicist said. Our consciousness is translated into chemistry, which in turn is sent to the body and controls our genetics and our behavior. And it's like, oh my God. My life went like, well, wait a minute. And the first thing was the most fabulous experience. I call it having a heart orgasm. I go, what do you mean? I go, well, my whole life was this science guy in the head, brain working, heating up, brain. But the moment I understood this fact, our identity is a broadcast that's picked up by these antennas. And I say, Now, here's the analogy. The body is a television set with a set of antennas tuned to a broadcast. And so right now you're looking at the Bruce show on this television right here. But the broadcaster, the broadcast is the field. It's a broadcast. It's not this. I go, so what does that mean? I say, well, you're watching a TV. The TV breaks. I say, yeah, TV's dead. That's gone. The question is the broadcast still there? Yes, of course the broadcast is still there. Get another TV and tune it in. You're back on. Reincarnation is a consequence of our body is the television set. Our identity is the broadcast that's picked up by it's called self-receptors. That if the body dies, the broadcast is still there. And if an embryo shows up with the same set of antennas, you're back in a different TV. I go, so what does that mean? I say, well, does it make a difference if male or female? I go, nope, that's the TV set. Does it make a difference if it's white, brown, black, red, yellow? I go, no, that's the TV set. We are not the TVs. We are the energy fields. And it's all consciousness. And everything you've been talking about in your program, Aubrey, is scientifically founded on this understanding of the quantum physics of sending the signals to the biological cells, and the cells, or their DNA is adjusted by what? The signals from your mind. I go, so what is the most important thing for our audience at this moment? All of you have been programmed to believe that genes turn on and off and control your life. I go, well, as far as you know, did you pick the genes you came with? I go, no, I don't know. You don't like the characteristics? Can you change the genes? I go, no, I can't do that either. And then, of course, genes turn on and off by themselves. We have programmed the entire damn population to believe they're victims of their heredity.
Interesting thing about gratitude, and we've looked at this pretty closely. You know, when you receive something favorable, or you've just received something that brings you joy, or something's happened to you, or something's happening to you that's exciting, you know, or it's a surprise. The emotion from that experience is called gratitude. So the emotional signature of gratitude means that something wonderful just happened to you, or something wonderful is happening to you. Now, the body is the unconscious mind. It's so objective that it does not know the difference between the real life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that person can create by thought alone. So the body is believing in that moment that it's living in a favorable environment. Now, according to epigenetics, it's the environment, the information from the environment that begins to select and instruct genes, and genes make proteins. And you don't change the gene, but you change the expression of the gene, right? So when you move from fear or frustration or resentment or impatience or suffering, and you change your emotional state, and you begin to feel that emotion ahead of your healing, the body begins to change genetically because it's beginning to believe then in that new environment that life has changed. And if the environment signals the gene and the end product of an experience in the environment is the emotion, she's actually signaling genes ahead of the environment. Keep that up, you can downregulate genes for disease and begin to upregulate genes for health. And that's exactly how the body begins to change. And so most people then will wait for their healing to feel gratitude. And truly in this work, if you understand that principle and you assign meaning to the act and feel gratitude, you can begin to make biological changes. And that's exactly what our research shows.
The transcendence of thinking means the transcendence of the egoic mind. It means that you're able to spend part of your time relatively free of compulsive thinking, certainly free of self-serving thinking and destructive thinking that continuously creates unhappiness for yourself and the people around you. How many people live the compulsive narrative in your mind that for many people is very negative, constantly critical, constantly complaining, never at ease with what is. There's always something wrong, fault finding, because the ego grows through the constant opposition, constant antagonism, never at ease, always looking for the next thing to complain about. And it strengthens the egoic self. The more you complain, offended is a new version these days. It's very popular on the internet. I'm very, very offended. Outrageous. How dare you? There are thousands or hundreds of thousands who go on every day, they look on their screen waiting for the next thing to be offended by. And the ego loves it. And for many of them, it's the only way they can inflate their ego, by sitting on the screen and sending out tweets. The transcendent of thinking is not any kind of regressive movement. We are not regressing to the state of somebody whose mind is relatively undeveloped and who does not have a problem with egoic thinking because there's very little going on in their minds. What used to be called, before it became politically incorrect, idiot or fool. The fool was, they were always, you could see happy fools. They don't, there's not enough thinking to make them unhappy, so they are below egoic thinking. In medieval times, every village had at least one village idiot or fool, and normal was accepted, essential part of the community. And even the royal courts had a fool, a very important figure, although that figure probably was just pretending to be a fool, and that was one of the most, sometimes very influential position in the royal court, but also one of the most dangerous jobs you could have, because you could lose your head at any moment. But only the fool was able to tell the king or queen what was wrong, by making it into a funny story. But the fool is more deeply connected, as we know from mythology. The fool is more deeply connected with the source still, hasn't gone as far out as a normally developed human. He's more simple. The fool, for example, relatively speaking, is a simpleton. It's like the Hobbit in Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit is a simple guy. Doesn't think in complex terms, loves the simple things of life, loves eating and enjoyment. But why the fool has to go on this important mission that nobody else can carry out? That's a mythological motive. That's often the case, because the fool has a connectedness still with source that the more developed humans don't have. Similar motive in Forrest Gump, the movie. The fool does great things, this guy, Forrest Gump, because and life always supports him. If you watch that movie again, he saves people in the war, he does heroic things, but he doesn't claim credit because he doesn't have much of an ego yet. And all his life gives him the next thing and the next thing, supports him. But we don't want to go there. When I say cessation of thinking, I'm not talking about regressing to the stage that is the pre-thinking stage of humanity. I'm thinking about rising above, pointing to the possibility of rising above thinking. So you stop thinking, which is normally associated with diminishment of consciousness, And transcendence of thinking is an intensification of consciousness, turning up the light. This is why the term attention and alertness, those terms are extremely important. They're also used in Zen very frequently. The Zen teachings could be described, if you wanted to summarize Zen, you can just say simple things like pay attention. There was one Zen teacher who would, whenever they asked him a question to explain Zen, he became quite famous. He would always raise his finger. Please explain Zen to us. What is Zen? I haven't quite understood yet. He was calling people to attention. Now, this attention, there's a state of attention that sometimes people experience when they're engaged in dangerous activity. You can climb a mountain. Do you think you're doing much thinking when you're hanging on this wall? No, you can't. You have to be absolutely present. In that moment, you have transcended thinking, and the situation is forcing you into complete presence, this highest degree of alertness. Without it, you slip and you're gone. And so this high degree of alertness, however, has no tension in it. In the case of somebody practicing dangerous sport, yes, there is physical tension, but the state itself has no tension in it, and you do not need to engage in a dangerous activity in order to enter that state. We are entering it here because even as I talk about it, I hope, well, I don't really hope anything, but I trust that as I speak about it, simultaneously to listening to it, you can verify in yourself this state of attention, which is a state of very high alertness, but there's no tension in it. It's not the alertness that sometimes goes with fear, and you go, but it's not, that's really a contraction of the entire body. It's not really alertness. So that's not it. It's a relaxed alertness. There's both yin and yang in it, coming together, and it's that. I also mentioned the other day, when you first look at something for the first few seconds, a new vista, a new landscape, you enter a room, or you step out of a room into the open, or whatever it is, or suddenly something new comes into your into your perceptual field. In the first 2 or 3 seconds, you don't know what it is. You have to first take it in. There's a moment of alert presence. But usually you're only aware of the sense perception. You're not aware of the background of the alert presence itself. But you can be aware of the alert presence itself as you take it in. And that's the key. So you're not just alertly present, you're aware of the field of alert presence in yourself, so to speak, as yourself. And the awareness of it and it are the same thing. Cessation of thinking. Now, you can try it. Even now, I would suggest that as I'm speaking, you may find, you may not know this yet, in the moments when I'm not speaking, like now, and now, and now, if you're alert, you're not thinking, you're just present. And now, there's just an alert field of presence.
So some of you may not be able yet to be totally free of thinking, but I believe that most people are able to, they have short gaps of no thought, pure awareness, but no thought. Just a short. And then you look around. In that moment, your personal sense of self has receded. In a moment of pure presence, which is just this, you have no memories and you have no expectations for future, because you have no thought. But you haven't fallen asleep, you're very awake. In that moment, you're not a person anymore. What are you? Just a field of consciousness, conscious presence. Something has emerged from within you and has taken place of the person. The person is still there, it's just gone receded. If the only thing you achieve in life is this, that you are able to be free of compulsive and addictive thinking, if you're able to, almost one could say, to choose not to think when there's nothing in particular to think about, when you can just be present. So in other words, if you can step out of thinking into aware presence, that alert space, then that is the greatest thing you could achieve in this lifetime, that any human could achieve in this lifetime. And yet there's nobody left to say, I have achieved it. That's the problem for the ego. The ego would love to say, oh, I have achieved the state of presence. So it's not an achievement. I'm just saying it's an achievement, but it's not really. Because you didn't do it. You got out of the way and then it happened.
I say 99% of issues of health and disease, I say, where does that come from? Not from the genes. I say, where does it come from? I say, stress. I say, well, how come? This is the reason, so you understand why stress is responsible for cancer, heart attacks, Alzheimer's, things like that. I'll give you the answer. It's all the same answer. You ready?
Yes.
Let's go back to the story that 100,000 years ago, we're outside, we're picking berries, we're having a meal, everything is nice, and a tiger shows up. I said, now we got to run. So I say, yeah, so what's the body want to do? It says, well, stop growing now and start getting ready to run. I said, well, how do you get to run? I said, you need the blood in the arms and legs. You need all the blood for the energy. And I go, yeah, the energy to run. So here's 3 things that happen when the stress hormones come into the body. Number 1, it takes the blood vessels in the gut down here, all the organs, and squeezes them shut. And that makes the blood get pushed to the arms and legs, okay? So I say, yeah, but what's the function of the gut? Maintenance of the body, fixing, cleaning, repairing, taking care of it, filtering the debris and all that. It takes care of you. It's cleaning the system and running. I said, but what happens when you're under stress? I say, the blood vessels get squeezed shut. That means there's no energy to take care of the body at this moment. I say, yeah, but where's the blood? I say, got pushed to the arms and legs. That's the one I need to run away.
So what happens then to your gut and all the other organs?
Well, the first thing is this. Guess what? You can even feel it. They call it sometimes butterflies in the stomach, or they call another word queasy. It feels like funny going on in your gut. I say, those feelings, you know what? That's the blood vessels squeezing shut with the stress hormones. You can feel it, okay?
Yeah, I work part-time with kids. I teach at a primary school, and usually when kids come to you, they say, like, if there's something wrong, I have a tummy ache. I have a tummy ache. That's the first thing, not a headache, tummy ache.
Yeah, because the fear is getting ready to run. And it's not in their awareness. It's just a feeling that something is wrong. And that's where the fear comes from. Something is wrong, okay? So the first thing is you shut off the growth, okay? Number 2, and this is critical, the immune system uses a lot of energy. That protects you on the inside of your body. But if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger and you have an infection, how much you want to use the energy to fight the bacteria, or you want to use the energy to run away from the tiger? The point is simply this. The immune system uses a lot of energy. If you've ever been sick, sometimes you don't even have the energy to get out of the bed because the immune system uses that much. So I say, yeah. So now think about it. Here's a problem. You have a bacterial infection and you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. How much energy to fight the bacteria? How much energy to fight to run away from the tiger? The answer, who cares about the bacteria? Because if the tiger catches you, bacteria, you don't got a problem anymore. So the idea is this. I don't need the immune system to work when I'm running away from the tiger. So stress hormones shut off the immune system.
Why is it so hard to make genuine change happen in our lives? People want to change. They want to do different things. Why is it so hard?
I think the biggest difficulty in change is making a different choice. Now think about the New Year's resolutions. Everybody's very clear about what their intention is, what they want, whatever that is. But if you keep making the same choices, you're going to keep doing the same things. You're going to keep creating the same experiences. You're going to keep feeling the same emotions. And your biology and your neurocircuitry and your chemistry and your hormones and even your gene expression is going to stay the same because you're the same. But keep thinking the same way, keep acting the same way, keep feeling the same way, and do it over and over again. Those circuits in the brain ultimately become hardwired. And the emotions that are a response to someone or something, even your own thoughts, get conditioned subconsciously as a program into the body. So 95% of who we are by the middle of our life is an unconscious set of thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that are automatically programmed into our biology. So the first step to change is not thinking positively. You got to become conscious of those unconscious thoughts when you decide to make a different choice and it doesn't feel familiar. The thought that says, start tomorrow, it's too hard, just do it anyway, go ahead and make that choice, do the same thing. You're not good enough, you'll never change, you're too much like your parents, I failed last time. You have to be able to become so conscious of those unconscious thoughts that you would never go unconscious to that thought ever again, and that's change. You'd have to catch yourself, how you speak and how you act. If you want to be happy and you're blaming and you're complaining and you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're judging everyone, those behaviors are not going to make you happy. They're actually going to make you unhappy. So you got to become so conscious of those unconscious habituations that you wouldn't go unconscious and behave that way. And then, of course, you got to look at those emotions that are pretty much chemical residue from the past, and decide, does this lack, does this suffering, does this pain belong in my future? And that process of becoming so conscious that we don't go unconscious is the process of change. And how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change. So the hard part about change is when you decide to make a different choice, get ready. It's going to feel uncomfortable. There's going to be uncertainty. You're not going to be able to predict the next moment. It's going to feel unfamiliar. So if the body has been conditioned to be the mind, then the servant is the master. So the body starts sending information back to the brain to think a certain thought so that you make the same choice, that you do the same thing, you create the same experience.
This is familiar.
Get back to the same feeling of suffering. That feels so much better than the uncertainty of the unknown. So going from the old self to the new self and crossing that river literally is a neurological, it's a biological, it's a chemical, it's a hormonal, it's a genetic death of the old self. That's the phoenix lighting itself on fire. And most people would rather cling to that familiar place than take a chance and possibility. That void, that vacuum actually is the perfect place to create. And we discovered this, that the brain changes the most when you get to that point where you think you can't go any further and you want to quit. If you go past that point, that is the unknown. Now, the unknown has always been wired in our biology, that the uncertainty of the unknown is always a scary place. Is that a tiger in the bushes, or is that just a shadow? So the unknown becomes a very scary place when we're living in survival. So most people never take that chance and possibility. But if a person's actually taught how to execute in the unknown, and there's nothing scary there, and they can apply the same principle and say, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? And a belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over again. So what is the voice in my head that I want to program my brain into thinking and believing? What behaviors am I going to demonstrate in my life if I'm going to not behave this way around this person or around this circumstance, and I want to behave a different way? Let me rehearse in my mind, close my eyes, and get really clear on how I'm going to respond or behave in this circumstance. And the act of mental rehearsal literally grows circuits in the brain. Now your brain's looking like you've already done it. Your brain is no longer a record of the past. It's being conditioned and mapped into the future. So now you have the circuitry in place. So if you keep practicing that, the hardware becomes more automatic. It becomes more of a software program, and you start behaving that way.
You need to realize most humans have this inbuilt dysfunction. They cannot acknowledge the present moment. Unconsciously, they regard the next moment, whether it's a minute from now, or an hour from now, or 2 years from now, always regard it as more important. Whenever you are impatient, trying to get somewhere, waiting for something impatiently, what's the next thing I have to do? And I have to do that. And you're pulled in all kinds of directions. What's now? Oh, now I have to do that and that and that. And there's always the pull towards the next thing. That is, I call that sometimes, you lose yourself in doing. Doing is necessary, obviously, you need to do, but to lose yourself in continuous doing is a serious dysfunction, but it's so normal that nobody realizes it. So what if you lose yourself in the doing, there's always another, and this is how stress arises. Stress is the gap, in the gap between now and later, the projected then, now and then, in that gap arises, the stress arises. So the mental projection towards future creates the stresses between where I'm here, but I want to be there. And for many humans, that is their predominant state. They are here, but they really want to be there, either there in space or time. It's amazing, and even you, awakening beings, may still, sometimes or often, find yourself in that state where you'd suddenly realize that the whole day you've been stressed about this, that, and that, and that. The world makes so many demands upon you. You need to deal with this and this and this, amplified by the gadgets that we now use, which is an amplification of the dysfunction through this. And you lose yourself in the doing. You become completely uncentered and basically lost. There are many, it happens even to children already at an early age these days. And many children are suffering from attention deficit disorder and so on, which means their mind is being pulled always away from the present moment. So lost in doing. Lost in doing really comes back to lost in thinking. Thinking underlies doing. So you're lost in your thoughts about the world. And then you engage in all kinds of activities propelled by thought that now I need to do this, now I need to do that. So the basic condition still for most humans on the planet, so fundamentally, yes, they are lost in doing,
They lose themselves into, but basically it means they are lost in their mind, in the movement of thought. What now? You identify then, they identify with every thought that arises. And many thoughts are about future or the past. Not that many thoughts are about the present moment. And if they are about the present moment, then it is an interpretation of the present moment that is completely determined and colored by your past conditioning. So, very interesting to observe in oneself this tendency to deny, devalue, disregard, reduce the present moment to a means to an end. It's always a means to an end, but it's never recognized for what it is in itself. And often it is not, it is more than a means to an end. For many humans, this is a very dysfunctional way of being. For many humans, the present moment is actually regarded unconsciously as an obstacle that they need to get beyond. There's a continuous underlying unease. And what's the next thing that's going to go wrong? I know it's going to happen. Lost in the mind, lost in thought. There was an Indian teacher who described the essential human condition as lost in thought. And of course, that's how it is. This is then, this movement of thought gives you your sense of identity. Then the unease, the uneasy narrative, the problematic narrative of me and my life. I have to think about this when I wake up in the middle of the night, and I carry this heavy burden of my problematic life. For many humans, their identity is unconsciously regarded as a problem to be solved. I am a problem that I'm looking for a solution to this problem that I am. And of course, then you go to a therapist. Now, if the therapist is good, he might be able to take you beyond that. Depends. If he or she is not good, then you get more deeply entrenched, and 15 years later, you are still undergoing psychoanalysis and find ever deeper layers of complexity in your past, and there's no end to it. So, the present moment is devalued, not recognized, regarded either as a means to an end or an obstacle. That is, for many humans, that is their predominant state of mental, emotional state. And as I said, their identity is derived from that. So it's the error lies in identification with thought. Now, the question arises, who or what is it that identifies with thought? If I am not the story that I tell myself about who I am, if I am not ultimately that, then who or what am I? And what is it in me that identifies with the story? What is it that creates this sense of identity that exists mostly in a state of unease, or very often discontent, because it cannot acknowledge the present moment. That is the ego, by the way. That's what we call it, the egoic sense of self. There's a very simple spiritual practice to get you to the realization of who or what it is that identifies. I suggest at this moment that observe yourself internally right now to see if there's any lingering emotion in you, perhaps from earlier today or an hour ago or yesterday or the past 2 years or the past 10 years. Is there any, and can you feel, for example, is there an irritation somewhere? Is there some kind of anxiety? Is there kind of heaviness, a certain heavy mood, a despondent mood, perhaps? Is it lingering there? Is there anger, big thing, some residue of anger from what happened earlier? Is that in you? And then normally humans would say, I am angry. Or they would say, I am anxious, I'm fearful, I am in a bad mood. Now, there's already a delusion when the moment you say, I am angry, or I am anxious, that indicates already that you have identified with the emotion of anger or the emotion of sadness or the emotion of fear. You have identified, you equate I with what arises in your field of consciousness. So you say, I'm angry. It would be more correct to say, there is anger in me right now. Now, it may sound a trivial difference between saying, I am angry and there's anger in me, but there's a significant difference which goes beyond mere syntax, how you put words together. Because when you say I am, you equate I with whatever condition is there in you. This applies to emotion and it also applies to thought. Because anger is often, it's not just the anger as emotion, the anger also exists as angry thoughts, and then they reinforce each other. It's a vicious circle. When you are trapped in irritation or anger, the emotion feeds the thought, and the thought feeds more energy to the emotion. It's a vicious circle, and you don't want to get out of it. You might notice when you observe an angry person or a despondent person or an anxious person, they don't really want to be free of the anger. They don't want if you suggest it to an angry person, you can be free, you will not get a pleasant answer. And you've seen angry people who they are in the grip of anger or irritation, they cannot help it, then they shout at you and then they leave the room, and a minute later the door opens, they come back because they thought of something else to insult you with. They are in the grip of it. There is complete identification with thought and emotion. They are lost in thought, they are lost in emotion. But who or what is it that is lost? If I'm not the thoughts and the emotion, who or what am I? Okay, I just asked you to just have a look inside yourself and see what it is, if there's anything there that's jarring and doesn't feel good, but it's there. And I'm not saying try to get rid of it, no. Acknowledge the present moment. The present moment is what is, externally or internally. That's what is. But there's a huge difference now. You've already, by recognizing that there is, let's say, irritation, anger, or anxiety in you, an additional element or dimension has come in. And that dimension we could call awareness, or we could call it presence. And the moment awareness comes in, you are no longer completely identified with it. One could say, I sometimes describe it as, let's say, there's the anger, and as your awareness of the anger comes in, there's a little bit of space around it. That's the awareness. The awareness knows that there's anger. The anger may still be there. It may not immediately disappear, but the awareness knows it's there. Or whatever else it may be. The arising of awareness is spiritual awakening. The disidentification that happens when awareness arises, that is the spiritual awakening or the arising of the transcendent dimension of consciousness. Transcendent because it transcends who or what you are as a person.
What do you mean by being able to change inner evolution? Because we all really do believe that genes are destiny.
Well, the biggest story comes down to knowledge is power. And everyone goes, yeah, we all know knowledge is power. But let me put it in a better way for us now. A lack of knowledge is a lack of power. And a misperception, by definition, is a lack of knowledge. And now I have to say, we have been for the last 50 years operating under two very important misperceptions. A, the one you brought up, genes control our life. This is totally false. And the second one is actually the idea of a Newtonian universe that's split into physical matter and invisible energy in two different realms, and they don't communicate, and whatever's physical should be, interfered with by something that's physical. So that's why we have pharmaceutical drugs. We have a physical body. You want to fix it, you have to give it something physical. So those are the drugs. And that's an outdated and disempowering illusion, because it turns out it's energy and consciousness that shape the world. And let me just emphasize it so it's not so weird sounding. It's consciousness. Our mind is creating this. Well, quantum physics is, to me, the most valid science on the planet. Even before it was fully understood, the theoretical ideas that were presented have all been actually realized that that this is such an amazing science, quantum physics. And I say, so what's relevant about this valid science? I go, the first principle in quantum physics is consciousness is creating our life experiences. And, that's so new age. I go, no, that's about as hardcore science as there is. And this consciousness, and this is why I love working with you, Lynn, because your job has been raising consciousness around the world. And that is how we're going to evolve, is not physically evolve, but we're going to evolve with consciousness. And so the knowledge that you're providing for people is empowering, and I like to do the same.
When you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, you're beginning to change your brain and body from living in the past present reality to living in the future present reality. And the stronger the emotion that you feel, the more you'll pay attention to the picture in your mind. Mm-hmm. And now you're beginning to emboss the circuitry in your brain, creating a long-term memory and emotionally conditioning your body into that future. And we could say then, you're remembering your future.
Yes.
And now the idea then is to get up and to get your behaviors to match your intentions. Mm-hmm. You have to then stay conscious of those thoughts that say, start tomorrow, I'm too tired, this will never work, it didn't work last time. You got to be the governor of those thoughts. You got to start making different choices. And the hardest part about change is not making the same choices that you did the day before.
Over and over.
So you got to review the choices that you're not going to make. You got to think about the behaviors you're going to change, even how you speak. Mm-hmm. What experiences do you need to stay away from with certain people in certain places and times? And what emotions bring you to a lower denominator that causes you to no longer see that vision, because that emotion, that familiar emotion, is going to cause you to view your future through the lens of the past. So then when you combine a thought and a feeling, it's called a state of being. So then your job is to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day, to keep your energy up, independent of the people and the conditions in your life, independent of the habits and emotional addictions in your body, and independent of time. And I say, if you do that properly, get ready. because something unusual is going to happen in your life. It's the law, and it's going to come in a way that you've never thought of. That's the unknown. That's the surprise. The brain learns by mistakes and surprises.
You can look at the world wars, you can look at all the terrorism and all the other mad wars that are being fought as it's just a question of degrees of unconsciousness, not different. So when you go into that state of unconsciousness, it takes you over, you lose it. Basically, then, that is the same energy field that has created what we see as the madness of human history, and what we see of the madness of the so-called world news. The same energy. So don't complain about all these violent people who are doing all these dreadful things. All that it is human unconsciousness in a more pronounced form than yours or your partner's. And so that helps a little bit to find perhaps almost some compassion towards all these crazy people that are doing such crazy things and creating such terrible suffering. Now, if you become compassionate towards them, don't worry. It doesn't mean that they will not experience the consequences of their unconsciousness. That still happens. By being compassionate to another human being, you don't necessarily remove the karmic consequences of their action. But you yourself become free from being drawn into the karmic cycle. So the act of forgiveness does not mean that this person is not going to suffer the consequences, because life makes sure, in whatever form, that they do suffer the consequences of the suffering that they inflict on other human beings. It's a karmic law. But if you don't want to be part of that anymore, if you want to step out of the karmic law, the first step out of and the most important step out of the karmic law is forgiveness. Then you do not feed it, you don't become part of it. That's why traditionally in spiritual teachings of various traditions, forgiveness is always emphasized. It must be real, though. There are many forms of superficial forgiveness when just the mind is, okay, I forgive you. It's not deep, it's not real yet. The mind is trying to forgive. But you can only forgive if you realize that whatever actions have been perpetrated are the effects of human unconsciousness. In other words, what Jesus said on the cross, or is reported to have said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Very profound statement. It is a profound statement that can be applied to any act of violence perpetrated against other humans or life forms. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Not knowing what they do, of course, means they are unconscious. The word unconscious probably in that sense wasn't used at the time. So he said they don't know what they do. Karmic law still operates, but without you. And you can notice karmic law when you see a movie. Some movies like to manipulate your emotions. And so there are particular types of movies where they build up the tension by showing you some very evil person. And this evil person is killing all these people or hurting all these people. And then you're being manipulated to feel that incredible pull that this person should suffer for what he or she has done. That's the manipulation. And the audience loves that. They love watching things like that. So then the emotion builds up. And finally, there are even some movies like the movies that about vigilantes who take justice in their own hands because the justice system doesn't deal with the criminals anymore. So finally you have this guy who goes out and kills all the bad guys. And your emotions have been manipulated so much that the audience says, yes, yes, he must die. Not realize, no, what you are feeling, this incredible. It might also happen if you read about some dreadful crime that somebody has committed, and then if you read it on the internet, you can read on some news websites. You can read the comment section, and in the comment section, every other comment says, "We should have the death penalty. He needs to say electric chair. He needs to be." Done to what he they should do to him, and all these, and this is an enormous pressure that people feel inside, and this is connected to karmic law, because there's a compensatory factor in karmic law, and you can feel that as the pressure inside you, but it keeps you trapped in karma. So in that sense, watching these movies is not helpful. Because it keeps you trapped in that wheel of karma. So they don't teach forgiveness there. So we are talking about something very important, and that is dealing with human unconsciousness and what looks like evil. So there are many things that are quite dreadful. So how does that affect our state of consciousness, and what role does our state of consciousness play in this whole scenario? It does have a role to play. So it's for us important that we are no longer part of action and reaction, because the definition of karma is action. Karma means action and reaction, and it goes on and on. And as you can see in certain societies and so on, the karmic thing goes back centuries and centuries. The same grievance transmitted from one generation to the next and the next and the next, and they are all asleep. This is why spiritual teachings say you are asleep. They are all so unconscious, they get taken over by the collective mental emotional pattern and the mental story. They just inherit it from their parents, and then they pass it on to their children. And then each generation suffers. They suffer. They so much suffering for each other. And at some point, the suffering becomes almost unbearable for certain people within that society. And that's the beginning of a shift when it gets too much. So suffering drives humans to a point of awakening. That's a strange paradox here is the suffering is created by the unconsciousness in humans, but in some strange way, eventually, it wakes you up, it awakens you. That's the redeeming feature behind the suffering that humans create for each other. Eventually, it leads to a spiritual awakening. So, it's a good thing to realize it all comes down to your state of consciousness and how you relate to the people around you, and that spreads. That is what creates the world. And even how you react to when you listen to the world news has a certain influence, because all human minds are connected at a deeper level. So the way in which you react to what you hear on the world news contributes either to the unconsciousness. If you get on your computer or the iPad and you type in, "This guy does not deserve to live. He should die slowly and they should torture him," then you become part of the same karma. If you've ever done that, please forgive yourself. And if you enjoy reading those comments, also forgive yourself.
I was given an opportunity to go to San Francisco and have a big presentation at a big conference on energy and crystals and stuff like that. And I thought, well, there's going to be an audience there, energy and crystals. Like, okay, everything I'm talking about in biology, man, I was so excited. And I thought, this is my great opportunity. And it was like 3 months before, and I thought, okay, I'm going to work on this. And then I just let it go. I let it go, and now it's getting to a month before. And I said, I got to work on what's my seminar going to be? What's my seminar? And all I had in my head was, okay, this was a new agey kind of thing. So I thought, well, back then, what the heck was new agey? I said, oh, that's where they wear all white shirts and white pants and a white vest, white clothes, and that they're so delicate and they speak in a very quiet tone and they're so new agey. And that really wasn't me. I was like the bull in the china shop, it's like, hey, let me out. And it goes, no, I got to calm down. I got to be cool. I'm going to present this in a new age fashion. So I tried to formulate a new age me to present this. Well, now it's about a week before this conference, and it's like my new age me has not come up with any idea of how to present this. And then it started to get closer. It was just a few days away. I'm going to go to San Francisco. I was like, oh my God, I don't have a talk. And I just said, forget it. Let me just be me. I just want to talk the way I want to talk. I'm not going to conform to be some new age guru. That's not me. I'm a science guy, and I'm going to say what I want to say. And finally, in that moment, it was just a couple of days before, and all of a sudden I said, that's it. No more new age. Let's write this. And the moment I let go of some persona I was supposed to be and just said, nah, I'm just going to be me, all of a sudden, the words started coming out. I can remember I grabbed a yellow pad and I had a pen, and the words started coming so fast. As soon as I said, stop being New Age guy, start being Bruce, the words started coming page after page. I had like 4 or 5 pages of notes. Like, after all those months, it was sort of like, okay, it was a little constipated in my consciousness, but it all of a sudden freed up. And it's why I am not them. I'm me. And try to act like somebody else took away everything I was. And that was at the point that said, oh my God, I'm not going to alter who I am. I love this research. I'm not going to tailor it for that audience. And it was so wonderful because there were 3 months where it was just logging back in my head. Yeah, I got to do this. I'm going to do this. Like, didn't want to do it. Why? Because at some level, the first thing was, I'm going to be somebody else. I'm going to be Mr. New Age guy. The moment I let go of being somebody else and became me, then all the words came down.
Okay, let's just say that lack is ingrained in there. You got the story, you lived on the streets, you lost everything, you got betrayed, your business partner took everything, took your wife, you got the story in the half, yes. Okay, you got to start telling a new story of the future, right? You got to believe in that future more than you have to believe in the past. So how do you do that? Mm-hmm. You only believe in the past when you feel the emotions of the past. The only time you're going to believe in the future is when you feel the emotions of the future, right? Okay, so in order for us to change a belief or perception about ourselves and our lives, we have to make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that's greater than the hardwired programs in your brain and the emotional conditioning in your body. And your body literally has to respond to your mind. That the choice that you're making to change in that moment becomes a moment in time that you never forget. And here's the key.
Physically.
The stronger the emotion you feel when you make that choice, the more you remember the decision. Okay, so then how do we down-regulate that old belief? If the trauma created an emotional quotient of 6 or 7, then your decision to change your beliefs got to be a 9.
Right.
And you got to come out of your resting state, and that moment has to define you. You could say, I know exactly where I was, the time of day it was, who I was with, when I made my mind up to change, right? Because you created a long-term memory. Long-term memories are created from strong emotion,
yes.
right? But if the amplitude of that emotion is greater than the betrayal, boom, the body starts responding to the mind, and you're actually giving your body a taste of the future emotionally. So you brand your...
What's possible.
No, your body's actually getting the taste of that future event.
It's experiencing the future now.
Exactly. Big explosion in the quantum field. Big explosion. So the side effect of that is if you combine that clear intention with that elevated emotion, you're basically remembering your future, and it looks no different than remembering your past. Think neurologically within the circuits of that memory and feel within the emotions of that new belief, and watch your life begin to change, because nothing changes in our life that we change. And when we change our energy, we change our life. So now the experiment all of a sudden is no longer based on it being hard or trying or wishing or wanting or hoping. That's what we do when we're in lack or separation. It's about change. So then when we finally realize, in order for us to become abundant, we have to overcome the old personality. And that's 95% of who we are, right?
Yes.
So then the side effect of the beginning of this process is a lot of discomfort. It is a lot of discomfort because you're stepping outside the known into the unknown, and now you can't predict.
It's scary.
No, you'd rather hold on to your lack.
The pain, the suffering.
Rather tell the story of that. At least it makes you feel something that's familiar. When you step outside and you're saying, I'm not going to complain about money any longer. I'm not going to complain about I don't have any. I'm not going to judge other people who do. I'm not going to say I can't. I'm not worthy. It's never going to work. All those things got to go. I'm not going to feel lack. I'm not going to feel unworthy. I'm not going to feel separation. I'm not going to feel resentment. These are the things that are keeping my reality the same. Now it's no longer about abundance, it's about who you become. So the overcoming process becomes the becoming process. And so many people come to this work, they want abundance, they want healing, they want a new relationship, they want a new career, they want the mystical, but really they want wholeness. And
they want healing, they want peace.
They want wholeness.
Because they feel unwhole.
Well, when you're in lack or you're in separation, you're not whole. Imagine feeling so much wholeness that's impossible to want. That's what we're working on with people. Then you can really enjoy a sunset. Then you can really enjoy a meal. Then you can really enjoy your friends. Then you can. I talk to people that are very abundant. I mean, in the billions abundant, and so many of them say we are in misery.
Because they're not whole.
We're in agony because they can't enjoy life anymore. That's what they want. I mean, people want abundance to be able to enjoy life. They want to be able to do whatever they want with whoever they want as many times as they want, wherever they want. That's freedom, right? Or people want abundance. The sponsoring thought is really they want freedom, right? Or whatever their sponsoring thought would be, right?
In this world, you have to be careful with what kind of thoughts you absorb from the collective, because there's so much unhappiness in the collective energy field of humanity. So it's very easy to get drawn into that if you're not careful and participate in the suffering of the collective, fear, anxiety, anger that's everywhere. It's also very easy to be affected by certain thoughts that can take over your mind, that come from the collective, thoughts and thought patterns. anybody who is not sufficiently present, sufficiently aware, is susceptible to being infected by certain thoughts. The mind, certain thoughts become lodged in your mind. Every thought is an energy formation, like you could say a little entity. The thought gets lodged in your mind and attracts associated thoughts and becomes a bundle of thoughts. And without awareness, you identify with the thoughts, and then you are being possessed by certain thoughts. They may arise from your personal, but very commonly they arise from the collective. In your personal life, you could develop some kind of thought that of an obsessive nature that occupies your mind, and you can't get rid of it. It could be the thought of one directed to one particular person, very, very negative thoughts, even at the simplest level. Some people you can have a melody that you can't get rid of in your mind. You can have a whole day or 2 days and you can't get rid of this thing that's in your mind. It repeats itself again and again. You can have certain assumptions about this world, like they may be totally absurd and irrational, or there may be some truth to it, but only there may be an aspect of the truth. You might think that the most absurd thoughts could be there. You might think that the extraterrestrials are already here. Well, they may be, but and every other human is actually an alien, and you just have to look at them carefully to figure out whether they are aliens or humans. And that could, I'm not excluding the possibility that some aliens may be here, but I'm talking about obsessive thoughts that are probably not correct. And then it colors your subsequent perception of reality, gets totally colored by the obsessive thoughts, and it can explain everything in those terms. All the evils of the world have suddenly one explanation. Another one that's also in the collective, you can have a thought that the entire world is divided into oppressor and oppressed. Any human being either belongs to the oppressors or to the oppressed. That was an idea in communism, in economic terms, in terms of social power. They divided humanity into oppressors and oppressed. And then you can look at any human being and immediately, he's oppressed, he's an oppressor. Now, thing is, of course, oppressors and oppressed have existed, and to some extent in some areas still exist. But to take one fragment of truth, because the totality of human life is much vaster than that. This is one aspect. But if you take one aspect that then occupies your mind because of lack of awareness, you are possessed by a thought. And this thought says the entire world, this is just one example, could give many examples. The entire world is the essential identity of any human being is either they are oppressed or they are the oppressor. Now, of course, if that is the thoughts that dominate your mind, then obviously you would probably regard the oppressed as the good ones and the oppressors as the bad ones. So that then that simplifies life enormously. You immediately can decide who is good and who is bad. And you are probably good, presumably. Even if you are an oppressor, traditionally, you now recognize your sins, and you will atone for your sins of being an oppressor, and you side with the oppressed, and therefore you become one of the good people. Okay. So we had the same phenomenon in very extreme form. We all know about Soviet communism. We know about Chinese Mao Zedong Cultural Revolution, quite a crazy time period. We know National Socialism in Germany, all these, the evils perpetrated by all these collective delusional systems that divided people into good and bad, entire groups, gave them an identity. I was in Cambodia a few years ago and visited the death camps of where Cambodians. It's a small country, so not many people are familiar with the recent history of Cambodia, but they had an extreme communist regime under a mad dictator called Pol Pot. And in that extreme communist regime, Cambodia experienced dreadful suffering. 1/3 of the population was killed by their own government because they were the oppressors. An oppressor was anybody who could read and write, because obviously they were exploiting the peasants. Anybody who wore glasses, would immediately, like that's right, oppressor, they would be sent from the cities into the countryside to work on the fields where they didn't have enough food, and most of them starved. Total lack of humanity, total lack, because of the entire country was dominated by one absurd and obsessive thought that made it impossible for them to relate to any human being as a human being. They relate to him through the conceptualization that thought had created for them. They couldn't sense the humanity, the being of the other human anymore, the moment they had imposed a conceptual identity on them. This is an extreme example of what can happen to you when you're taken over by certain thoughts in your mind. This is not to mean that, of course, oppressor and oppressive existed and exist, but it's not the entire explanation. I mean, there are many other facts in this life. But I'm saying all this because you need to be very alert so that your mind is not taken over by certain thoughts that are not that invade your mind and color your view of reality. And there are certain irrational thoughts that are floating around in the collective at the present time. So it's very easy for you to absorb some of them, and being possessed by certain thoughts that maybe it's so irrational that it's unbelievable. But I'm not giving any examples, but you have to find it out for yourself. With awareness, you can. And be very careful with observing your mind. Be there as a witness of your mind so that you don't get taken over by certain thoughts, that your mind does not get taken over by certain thoughts. And then you you cannot perceive reality anymore as it is. Everything is colored by the veil of irrational thinking. So nowadays, these things can spread very quickly and easily, these irrational things. In the past, they were confined to either one country or one area in a particular country. But nowadays, certain irrational thoughts can go through the entire world, through the technology we have, and can quickly affect millions of humans all over the world. So in the past, you had it, as I said, limited. Let's say the hunt for witches in the past are totally absurd and irrational. It's a mental disease that affected certain countries or areas in certain countries. And this mental disease then, so there were some places in Europe, there were villages and towns in Europe in the Middle Ages during that time of collective insanity. There were almost no women left in some villages and towns at that time, because they had all been burnt or drowned because they were called as witches. Absolute insanity. So don't underestimate how insane humans can become. The only antidote that you have against that is awareness, so that your mind does not get affected by a mental virus. The awareness is aware of what your mind is doing, so that your mind does not get occupied by one particular way of thinking, which is probably irrational. Anything that's one-sided, that does not see the totality of a situation, like oppressor and oppressed, if you don't see the many factors that make up a human being's identity, so be very careful with what you consume in the media. The media that brings the news to you. Be very careful with what you consume, so that you do not take on, without knowing it unquestioningly, certain ways of looking at the world. Realize that you're being how manipulative most of the mainstream media has become. So you need to watch that. If you watch it knowing how you're being manipulated, and the people themselves are being manipulated too. So they are in the grip of unconsciousness, and they want to draw others into unconsciousness. So they're not the evil ones. They just don't know any better.
The immune system protects you from a threat on the inside. Yeah. But if the tiger's chasing you, who cares about the threat on the inside? I got a bacterial infection and a saber-toothed tiger chasing me. I think, where should I put my energy? And the hell with the infection. The tiger catches you. The infection's not a problem anymore. Yeah. So very important fact, profoundly, everyone listen. Stress hormones specifically shut down the immune system, because the taking care of the inside is not as important as taking care of the whole thing running away. In fact, stress hormones are so good at this that when doctors want to transplant an organ from person A into person B, the recipient of that organ is given stress hormones before the operation, because it reduces the function of the immune system, which would be rejecting the graft. And so you don't want the immune system to reject a graft, so you give them stress hormones, which shuts down the immune system. I go, well, guess what? In today's world, just watch the news for a moment, and all of a sudden your immune system is going, yeah. So that's number two. So number one, stress hormones shut down growth, because feeding the viscera for its functions not worthy of running away. I need to get the blood into the arms and legs. Again, to conserve energy, because look, the immune system uses a lot of energy. If you've ever been sick, sometimes you don't have the energy to get out of bed. So it's like, well, when it's operating, it could drain you of energy. Yeah, but if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, the hell with the immune system. And so you shut that down. So those are two insults to the system. In other words, if I'm not under stress, I'm nourishing my body and I'm encouraging my immune system, I'm staying healthy. But the moment I'm under stress, both of those things shut down and I'm ready to fight or flight. And then I said, well, there's a third one. I call that adding insult to injury. And the answer about what that means is this. The brain has the forebrain where conscious thinking is, and the hindbrain, which is like habit and reflex behavior. Conscious thinking is slow. I mean, imagine your car is going out of control and it's spinning, and I say, stay in the conscious mind. It's like, oh. I say, yeah, but the moment the car starts to go out of control, the stress hormones go in. Remember I told you they squeeze the blood vessels in the gut? They squeeze the blood vessels in the forebrain. I say, why? Because it pushes the blood to the hindbrain, which is 1,000,000 times more powerful than the forebrain as a machine processor. And I go, so why is it relevant? I go, because the moment the car is going out of control, it's, oh, well, you're turning the wheel, hitting the pedals, you're doing everything beyond fast, so fast, okay?
Yes.
So when you're in a stressful situation, thinking is slow. And therefore, the system doesn't want you to be slow. It needs you to go, boom, react, reflect right away. So the blood vessels from the same chemistry, squeezing the blood vessels down the gut, squeeze the blood vessels here, push it to the hindbrain, we become less intelligent when we're under stress because now we're reactive. And it gets to a point that sometimes you're so afraid that you take care of me. And then we give up control to the guy with the bigger stick.
Yeah.
You take care of me. Well, that means we're a victim. Yeah. Victim means we're powerless. I go, when stress hormones are in the system, the only power you have is to run. And I go, and the relevance about that is very simple. And that is that it was only designed with saber-toothed tigers in mind. I go, why is that relevant? I said, well, a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you. I go, yeah, and I'm running like crazy. I got blood in my arms and legs. I got all the energy. And I say, yeah, but if you escape that tiger in a few minutes of running, then there's no more threat. And then all of a sudden, the stress hormones are gone, and then you're back into growth and everything else. But today, stress is 24/7, 365. A human body was never designed to be maintaining a stress situation because it suppresses the vitality of the system. And in today's world, with the idea of COVID, everyone is afraid. I go, and guess what? The one thing you wanted was your immune system to work. And the one thing that's not working because you're afraid is the immune system. I go, the more fear people have, the sicker they become.
Yes.
And this is a wake-up call that says, man, we have to stop listening to that fear drum. They keep beating the drum. Everybody's going to die. I go, no, somebody's going to die. You know, there are people who are indeed vulnerable because they're already stressed immune system. People that live in stress are already open to a problem. Older people whose immune systems are not working up to the fullest capability, they're under threat because their immune system is already compromised. And then there's the people with what are called comorbidities. I go, what are they? I say, these are stressors on the system that are chronic. Overweight is one of the biggest ones. In the serious cases of COVID, 78% of those serious patients were overweight. Why? Overweight is a challenge to the system, and you're already challenging your immune system before the damn virus showed up. So that's a big problem. Diabetes type 2, meaning that's a stress world. Diabetes is a stressor that's in the system. The more stressors that you have going, the less effective your immune system is. So it turns out, here's a number, unfortunately, Americans, 60% of Americans have at least one comorbidity. They're slightly compromised, okay? But 40%, and this is where the issue comes from, have two or more simultaneous comorbidities. These are people that are ripe for infection. Why? Their immune systems are already compromised before the damn virus showed up. So it's like, well, then am I afraid of COVID? I said, well, if you're a healthy person, no. If you're a compromised person, then you should be taking care of yourself. I don't have to take care of myself. You have to take care of yourself because you're the one that's open. And yet we want everybody to put on the mask and everybody to get the vaccines. I go, that's stuff. I was going to say a bad word. That stuff is not valid. I go, what do you mean it's not valid? I say, the country of Gibraltar, 100% of that population has been vaccinated. And guess what? Delta went through there like a plague, man. And I say, yeah, but they were all vaccinated. I go, yeah, because the vaccine doesn't work. I go, well, yeah, but now Omicron. I go, no, the vaccine doesn't work. And they say, well, get your booster shot. I said, get the booster shot. It didn't even work the damn first time. Why should I take the second time? It does not work. And so the real issue is this. We have to take care of our health and not wait for other people to protect me from them. If I'm a vulnerable person, it's my responsibility to take care of my health.
First of all, mothering is as I said, is the hardest job in the world. And I raised three children, and I practiced raising them within many of these principles. And with children, number one thing is they have mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are called empathy neurons. They model behavior. When a lioness is teaching her cubs how to hunt, she's not on a chalkboard and saying, you go here, you go there. She's saying, watch me do this. And when the cubs watch the lioness hunt, as they're looking at their mom hunting, they're priming the very circuits in their brain to hunt. As they watch their mom, they're becoming their mom hunting. And the mother's act is selecting and instructing circuitry in their brain equal to the environment that they're perceiving. So what does that mean to an adult or a human being? You got to be the example of everything you want your children to be. That's the fast path to enlightenment. So you can't tell your kids, get off your technology while you're over there on the computer or on the phone or on the TV, and expect them to find something to do if you're not engaging. It's important to have technology, but it's also important to not have technology, and that's healthy as well. So one of the cool things that's happened in our community is we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids that come to our week-long events from the age of 7 or 6 all the way up to 25 and 26, and sometimes there's 200 on the stage, and the children are interested in understanding that they can create a better life. And so there's certain principles, I think, that really help parents. And of course, another one is never try to reason with your children when they're emotional. Because we don't want to be reasoned with when we're emotional. We want to be left alone until we get through the emotion, because no information could actually enter their brain that isn't equal to that emotional state. Now, one of the most important things that I think you can teach a child by demonstration, as well as story, allegory, and conversation, is to teach them how to shorten the refractory period of their emotional responses. So, as I said, you react to or respond to something or some condition in your outer world that changes your emotional state. It could create fear, it could create anger, create jealousy, hostility, envy, whatever. And so then the lingering of that emotion, that chemical, if you allow it to last for days to weeks, it's called a mood. If it lasts for weeks and weeks, 2 months on end, that's called a temperament. Oh, he's an angry temperament. Why are you angry? I'm angry because of this experience. If you keep the same emotion going on for years on end, that's called a personality trait. So personality traits many times are created by the experiences and the emotions that keep us connected to the past. Teaching children how to shorten their emotional reactions is so vitally important, because when we're in that emotional state, there's a gap between the way things appear and the way things really are. We're altered. We're not ourselves. And if we act during that time, if we send an email during that time, if we speak during that time, even if we think during that time, and we follow through, we'll normally say, I should have never said that. I never should have never thought that. I never should have sent that email. I should have never done it. So children then are so neuroplastic. It's so important for you to have conversations with them about how hard it is to overcome our emotional states when we're in the emotional state. As an example, with my daughter, my kids, whenever I saw her react to someone or something, whatever I was doing, as long as there was no injury or no one was in danger, I would stop and I'd turn around and I would observe her just for a minute while she was doing what she was reacting to, and she became aware that I was observing her. After she became aware that I was observing her, then I would deal with it however I had to deal with it. At the end of the day, I would lay down with my children in bed and I would start to talk about myself. God, I had a pretty tough day today. I lost it right around 3 o'clock. I couldn't get back the entire day. I was frustrated and I was impatient. I had too many things going on. I was overwhelmed and I wasn't present with you guys at dinner. I don't know, making something up. If you just pause for a moment, my daughter would say, yeah, I got really angry at Paris today. And I'd say, I know, I saw you. And then she'd say, yeah. And she'd start telling me what happened. And I'd say, okay, now that you know what happened, if it happened again, how would you do it differently? How would you behave differently? How would you evolve your experience? And then we would talk about it. And between her and I, we would come up with another plan, another rehearsal. We would begin to, okay, okay, so Paris comes in, she says, and you do this instead. And so before you go to bed at night, your subconscious mind is wide open to information. And so I would rehearse it with her before she would go to sleep, while everybody was in bed. And I would then tell a story of these kids that lived in a faraway land. And then I would bring in each kid's little allegory about them and what they were working on changing to give them an opportunity that they could evolve their experience.
So there's no need to demand that external conditions should be perfect so that you can become still. In fact, it's sometimes the case that it's precisely when external conditions are seemingly unhelpful that can sometimes be a great opportunity to find that true stillness. And especially that is the case when external circumstances have the appearance of actually being a hindrance, something disturbing, something happening that upsets the status quo in your life. And those are great opportunities, because then your motivation for going deeper as you suffer when things happen in your external life that, quote, unquote, should not be happening, then you begin to suffer. And as you suffer, the motivation eventually arises of going deeper, of finding the place where there is no suffering. And you could still suffer a little bit on the external level of your life. So sooner or later we find in our life that life does things to us, seemingly putting obstacles in our path, seemingly having bad intentions towards us. We experience diminishment in some form. Of course, the ego says, or the egoic self says, that's terrible. I don't want any diminishment. Diminishment meaning loss of something that had become part of your sense of self. It could be loss of possessions, could be loss of a relationship, loss of a loved one, loss of a healthy body, diminishment of physical health, loss of your persona, of what other people think of you. One day they tell you you're the greatest, and the next day they tell you you're awful. Diminishment of whatever kind is abhorrent to the egoic self. There's a beautiful saying, I believe it comes originally, I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter where it comes out of consciousness, so it doesn't really matter. But I believe it comes originally out of Sufism, and that is, when the ego weeps for what it has lost, the spirit rejoices for what it has found. And those people who, and there's no human, by the way, who does not experience this in life several times. Sooner or later, the next one comes. Some people experience it even very early in life. Some children have experienced loss of a parent, of both parents. So diminishment comes sooner or later. How do you meet it? Recognize it when it comes, not as a monster or the work of some malevolent deity or demon that wants to sabotage your life, but as an opportunity also. Now, you may not be able to be grateful for it in the moment of it happening. That would be perhaps too much to ask. But you will find that later, a year may pass, 2 years, depending on what it is, suddenly realize that it has taken you deeper into the essence of who you are, because something was removed from you that you thought you were, but it was a fiction ultimately. You had identified with something that ultimately is not who you are. It's a temporary thing. Possessions, not status, great physically strong body, good looks. A relationship. And then retrospectively, very often you are able to be grateful for the loss, for the diminishment, because it drove you deeper. It brought out the essence of who you are beyond any form. Now, it does not do that to all humans. It's for everybody. Diminishment is only a potential deepening. The possibility is there. Many, many humans are not able to use it because nobody has told them. the knowledge, this kind of spiritual knowledge, is still very limited. It is not part of mainstream culture. People are dying every day without having any true assistance. People who are approaching death, who are getting old, our mainstream culture still knows nothing. It's just, let's prolong life for as long as possible, even if it's totally pointless and it creates a lot of suffering. Let's just, because we don't know what to do with death. That's one of the reasons why the foundation will hopefully be able to reach people to use the opportunity of this greatest diminishment, which is death, the greatest, as you approach death, an enormous opportunity for spiritual awakening, realization. But many humans, of course, miss the opportunity of that diminishment, and with the result that the ego becomes even more hardened through it, or in the words of Brother David, shriveled up to an even harder, lifeless thing. Then either you carry continuous anger or resentment or despondency for years, which becomes part of your egoic identity, and the ego loves any kind of identity. If it's a miserable one, doesn't matter, I'll have it. Just give me a strong identity. I take miserable any time over being nobody. So the opportunity of diminishment is missed. Often you see when they're wealthy people, and suddenly something happens, they lose their money, and then they jump out of the window because their entire sense of self was associated with their possessions. There are people who lose their reputation. Or you remember, of course, the case of Mr. Madoff a few years ago, who had this fraudulent schemes, and people lost millions or billions of people who were investing with him on Wall Street. They lost, it was a pyramid, it was a Ponzi scheme, I think is the word. So he was deceiving all these people, and they lost all their money, and he had accumulated billions, and then finally it all collapsed. Now he's in prison, and his sons couldn't take it. One of his sons, apparently the sons didn't know what was going on. I don't know if that's true, but they were also working in his firm, in his company. I believe one died of cancer soon after, and the other committed suicide. Would have been a great opportunity if only somebody had told them, you've lost your money, you've lost your reputation. This is a great opportunity. Find yourself. Here, the opening is there. But it's just lack of information. Nobody told them. I hadn't actually thought of this until this moment, because we want to bring the teaching to places where it otherwise would not go or would not reach. And I just thought of Wall Street. We will donate books and CDs to Wall Street. So we'll have to call Goldman Sachs tomorrow, see if they agree. Now, they won't be very interested perhaps at the moment, but they may become interested in the future. Just wait. So you have already, I believe, everybody here has already experienced some forms of diminishment, to use that word, through the physical form, the psychological me entity. And for many, the reason why you're here is because you've gone through that, and it has deepened you. Even the collapse of a relationship. You don't have to be married, but you have a relationship, doesn't go well, it ends. It's a little death, it can be painful. It leaves a little hole in you. It seemingly rips something out of you, and for quite a while you feel it. It's not pleasant. But there too is an opportunity. So when the ego weeps for what it has lost, oh dear, so terrible, I'll tell you what happened. And I'll tell myself what happened. Even if nobody's listening, it'll go through your head. Oh, God. I can't take any more of this. I just can't take it. It's just too much. What's the point of it all? Just completely false. It's good to act out the ego sometimes, because then you can actually see it. It's like a reflection in the mirror, because it's funny, because you remember everybody knows, familiar with that in some way, and that's why it becomes funny. I'm learning from Marianne yesterday, because she has other ways of acting out the ego. It's a little bit more feminine, but I can try that too. It may look a little weird when I do it, though. But there's a lot in it that doesn't really need to be explained in words. Just this simple gesture implies a self-image, to look at yourself through a self-image. Look at me.
The difference between nature and nurture. People have tried to emphasize that the character of our life is derived from the nature, in this case, the genetics of who we are. For the longest time, nature prevailed. And it really got emphasized when we got into the nature of DNA. Because once they understood that the DNA was a blueprint to create your body, they also said it's the same DNA that controls your emotions and your behaviors. Are you pre-programmed? Well, since you didn't pick the genes and you can't change the genes, and apparently the genes turn on and off by themselves, that consciousness led us to believe that then our life is controlled by our heredity, and we become victims of that life. And as it unfolds, that's just the way life is. Well, that was true for a long, long time. Interesting enough, our understanding of heredity has profoundly changed. There's a revolution, which I discuss all the time, about the new science called epigenetics. The revolution is in the meaning of epi. Epi means above. So if this character is under epigenetic control, it means this character is under control above the genes, epigenetically. Well, wait a minute. Epigenetics is how environment, or our perception of the environment, is programming our genetics through our life experiences. Well, if you understand that, then we go from victim of heredity, genetics, to master of your life via epigenetics.
When people, first thing they have to do is they have to overcome their survival states. They have to overcome their programs. They got to be willing to sit with themselves long enough to wonder what's on the other side of I can't, or it's too hard, or I want to give up, or this sucks. What's on the other side of those thoughts? Those are just programmed thoughts. What's on the other side of this emotion called guilt or this emotion called frustration? What's on the other side of it, right? So you get people to a certain point, you give them a little bit of help, but the key then is we've done studies on this. If you close your eyes and you place your attention on your heart, turns out where you place your attention is where you place your energy, right? So if you can put your attention on your heart and not your cell phone, and you can keep it on your heart and feel it and experience it and pay attention to it, by paying attention to your heart, you're actually giving it your energy. Now, your heart tends to feel different emotions than other parts of your body, and what emotions it loves to feel is love, compassion, care, kindness, gratitude, inspiration, freedom. These are elevated emotions. So if you could put your attention on your heart, we see from the technology that we built, in time, and not a very long amount of time, just a few minutes, you'll start to see this very low frequency of the heart start going up, which means the energy that's indigenous to the heart, what the heart uses only, you're actually feeding it. It's energy. Right? So if you could do that then, and then you can slow your breathing down. When you slow your breathing down, you slow your brain waves down. We've measured that thousands of times. So instead of this short breath or instead of this kind of shallow breath, you really work on taking long, slow breaths through your heart. Inhale with the intention of relaxing. Hold it with the intention of relaxing while you hold it. Exhale with the intention of relaxing. Blow all the air out. Hold it for a few seconds. You're not going to die. Relax again. Inhale again. And just do a series of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of these, depending on working with your body so that it starts to feel safe again. That's what it is. You slow your brain waves down, you slow your breathing down, you convert from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic, and that's what we see. Then all of a sudden we see the person's parasympathetic nervous system go up and the sympathetic goes down. What does that mean? They're moving out of stress. Okay, the body's moving into that state of growth and repair. Now put your attention on your heart. Now do something really cool. Amplify. That's the amplifier. That's the creative center. So what do you want to feel? Like, what emotion do you want to feel when a future experience happens? Whatever that is. Feel the gratitude, feel the joy, feel the freedom, and breathe and feel and breathe, and keep relaxing into your heart, keeping your attention nowhere else out of the millions of things you can put your attention on. That's your target. And you work with your body, and you breathe and you feel, and as you start relaxing into your heart, you keep working on relaxing into your heart, and you feel it. You feel that emotion. There'll come a moment where that energy will naturally start moving up to the brain, and when that happens, the survival centers shut down. Brain moves into alpha. You see more in pictures and images. You could take it's like taking a sheet of paper, a sheet on a bed, and going like this. The heart sends this propagating wave right into the brain. Just follows, boom, right after the stroke volume, and it's telling the brain to be creative, to dream, to be unlimited. So the more you do that, here's the key. The more you do it, the more it becomes a skill. Now, when a person has a panic attack, right, what they do is they mismanage their attention. They picture the worst scenario that could possibly take place, and then they say, no, what if this happens? Oh, what if this happens? What if this happens? So they're making it actually 10 times worse, because if you prepare for the worst, there's always better chances of survival. The problem is they're combining that image in their mind, and they're actually living the experience emotionally. And so they're taking that thought and that feeling, that image and that emotion, that stimulus and response, and they're conditioning the body subconsciously to become the mind of fear. After a certain point, when the body's that out of balance, it will have a panic attack. Try as you may to control it with your conscious mind. You can't. You programmed it subconsciously, and then it gets worse, because after that one, you can't anticipate when the next one's going to happen. So you start getting ready for the next one, and that's what exactly starts this cycle. Okay, so what we discovered, that the more you relax into your heart and feel these elevated emotions, it's exactly like a panic attack. Only it's a love attack.
You need to challenge yourself. If you want to create something, if you want to bring about some change in this world, you want to make your life, your so-called life, better, you're looking to achieve this or to learn this or to acquire this, that's part of being human. We don't deny that. And if you don't want to achieve anything, let's say you have no ambition whatsoever, you say, oh, it's all pointless, because you don't want to challenge yourself, then life will challenge you even more. If you challenging yourself would be even to engage in physical activity and jogging. You're challenging yourself, or you're lifting weights. You're challenging the body on a physical level. The only way you can make the body stronger, the physical body, is by making, I'll put it like this, it's a strange way of putting it, but it's true. You have to make life difficult for your body. Otherwise it doesn't get stronger. Well, to lift a weight is, if you ask the body, would you rather have a good just relax or lift this weight? Oh no, I just want to relax. I don't want to make my life more difficult than it needs to be, so I just, you don't get stronger without but when you make life difficult for the body, then more energy is demanded and more energy comes flowing in. Energy doesn't come until you demand it. There's a request or a demand for energy because there's a gap between what you want and what, at the moment the body doesn't have enough energy and suddenly it comes. And then you reach a point when an influx of energy starts, then it's no longer perceived that you make life difficult for your body. Once the energy starts flowing, the body enjoys this flow of energy. But before the energy starts flowing, life was difficult for the body. And so you meet the threshold of life gets difficult for the body, and then energy comes in, and then suddenly not even perceived as difficult anymore. And that you may experience it every day when you start exercising.
Frequently I'm asked every day, how come you look so happy? And the answer is, I wake up happy. And why do I get this happiness? Where's it coming from? And the answer is this: it's another day on planet Earth. And what's so exciting about it is it's another day that I have no idea what's going to happen, but the greatest wishes and desires for some fun and excitement and a very joyous life. So I start off with, today's going to be a great day. And almost every day it ends up being a great day. Doesn't mean everything works right, but the beautiful part about it is I've really learned not to carry anything forward that is not really happy and joyous in my life. It reminds me of a story. Two Buddhist monks are walking along, and Buddhist monks are not allowed to touch women at all. And these two Buddhist monks are walking along, and they come to a river, and at that river there's a woman dressed in her wedding refinery, and she's crying because she can't get across the river wearing these clothes. So one of the monks just picks her up, carries her across, drops her off on the other side. Then the two monks continue walking. And about an hour and a half down the road, one monk says to the other one, "How could you pick up a woman?" And the one who picked up the woman looked at him and said, I dropped her off an hour and a half ago. Why are you still carrying her? And the whole idea about that is, the meaning of it is, when events happen in our life, it's not necessary to keep carrying them, especially if they're negative ones. You can just stop right there and go on to the next thing. It's a choice. Do I want to be in an environment where I'm not happy? Or do I want to be in an environment where I am happy? Oh, choice? Well, obviously. But most of us have that choice, but are so caught up in conventional rules and conventional way of mannerisms and social structure that we hold ourselves in places we don't even want to be. And then we sit there in our mind getting aggravated by the whole fact of, I don't even want to be here. And I go, well, then guess what? Choice. Pick a place you want to be. Go to the movie. Go do something else. Break the pattern. And when you break the pattern is your moment of power. Because when the pattern is broken, there's new choices at that moment. But if you don't break the pattern, you're going to follow a litany of up or down, depending how you started off the process. The litany down, not a great trip, I'll tell you that. But hey, I think it's over 20-some years, I haven't been depressed. I haven't even been angry. I get upset by some things, of course, but it doesn't mean I hold them. I drop that person off on the other side of the river and stop carrying it. And this is the choice. It really is a choice. You have to think about it, because it's a conscious awakening at a moment that gives you a choice, that wakes up and goes, do I want to do this? And that's that moment of choice. You take that moment of choice, and then you say, I'm moving into where I want to go. You make a habit out of this because you repeat this. And then guess what? You don't even have to think about it anymore because the subconscious program will always redirect you to the place you want to be. And the whole other world that we used to experience that used to irritate us and aggravate us and all that anxiety stuff, it just doesn't exist. And it doesn't mean everything's going right. But the whole beautiful part about it is, well, if it doesn't go right, okay, stop now, let's go do something else. Because it's the idea, it didn't go right, and then why didn't it go right, and who didn't make it right, and where is it going to go now, and blah, blah, blah. And what are you doing? You're digging a hole, and it's not going up, it's going down. And the whole idea is choice. But the most important part of choice is you have to stop long enough, not get caught up in the program and play out the program. There's a moment while you're playing the program, maybe you can separate and look at yourself and say, why am I doing this? Because that is the moment of power. That is the moment where you can say, I have a choice. I can do something totally different than to stew in this stuff. And then you are a powerful person.
To live in the present moment and manifest your dreams with Eckhart Tolle, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
Ego lives always with reference to past and future. We mentally are always somewhere else, instead of giving fullest attention to this, because this is the most valuable moment.